Hello everybody and welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary. Today I'm going to be talking to you about rye whiskey and specifically where you should go and start if you're just getting into rye whiskeys. So I've kind of worked with all of the Whiskey Dictionary community and I put out this post and I got a whole bunch of responses because I had this list of about 15 different whiskeys and then there were probably about 30 other ones suggested. So I kind of melded the list together into what I thought would be a really good top 10 for you to kind of get into. So a couple of quick things about rye whiskey, just in case you don't know, is that there are two different types of rye whiskey. And the first type is what you'd normally think of as 51% rye grain has to go into rye whiskey and it's made in America. The other, oddly enough, is Canadian whiskeys. And the reason I say oddly enough is because just for historical reasons, they're allowed to call themselves rye whiskey, but they don't actually even have to have any rye in the whiskey. So very strange, but interesting fact. Anyway, outside of that, rye whiskey, it kind of gives a spicy note. That's what we refer to it as. It's not spicy like hot sauce. It's spicy like, well, as soon as you try one, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It kind of burns your tongue a little bit, but it's not the same as a hot sauce. But that's why we call it spicy, because it's a little similar. Anyway, I have ordered this list from cheapest to most expensive, but one thing that you'll want to pay attention to, and I'll put this at the bottom on every one, is the mash bill. Now the mash bill is what whiskey is comprised of. In this case, a lot of ryes are either 51% or 95% or a couple or even 100% rye. And that difference will make a huge change in the way that your whiskey tastes. So without further ado, let's get into this list. Up first is Old Overholt. Now this is what you would typically consider a table whiskey. It's not going to break the bank, it's only $14 and it is 51% mash bill, so it's on the lower end. But in general, this is a decent place to start. If you only want to spend a small amount just to get a hint of what a rye can taste like, this is a good place. Up next is Rittenhouse. Now Rittenhouse is about $23 and has a 51% rye mash bill. Now this is a good place to jump over from bourbon into rye. There's not much more else to say though. Up next is George Dickel Rye. Now this is about $25 at a 95% mash bill. So this is a great place for you to jump in if you really want to experience what a high mash bill tastes like. That being said, George Dickel has been around forever, so there's a good reason for it. High West Double Rye. At $28 and 95% of the mash bill being comprised of rye, you're talking a pretty solid high rye whiskey. And High West has proven time and time again that they know how to make whiskey. I think this is one of the better choices on this list. Up next is Bulleit Rye. At $27 and 95% of the mash bill being comprised of rye, you're talking a pretty easy one to get into. That being said, it's also in a lot of bars, and it was my personal first venture into rye. So if you want to see my video on it, you can click on it up there. Up next is one that I hesitated to put on the list. This is Crown Royal Northern Harvest Rye. So I would not call this a beginner rye by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm honestly not sure what I would refer to as an advanced rye either. So I thought this one was worth putting on the list because frankly it's absolutely delicious. And I did a review on it as well, so if you want to get a little bit more information you can check that out. But at $30 for a $375, not a $750, so it's basically half as much as you'd be getting with the rest of these. And 90% rye count, I mean, it's really, really good. Up next is Sazerac Rye. So it's $30, it's got 51% of its mash bill comprised of rye, and it's made by Buffalo Trace. I mean, Buffalo Trace is known for quality. So this is a pretty safe bet, and this one in particular is thought pretty well of by the community. Up next is Michter's Rye. So this is $38. I could not find how much of the mash bill is comprised of rye, but I will also say that I've personally never tried this one. And most people in the comment section of that post I talked about previously actually recommended this. So I think this is probably one that's worth your time. I personally can't give it a solid recommendation because I've never tried it, but I will say that I have yet to ever hear a negative comment about Michter's. Up next is the Woodford Reserve Rye. This is about $40 and roughly 53% of the mash bill is comprised of rye. I will say that me personally, this would be one I would recommend to a friend and in fact have gotten positive feedback from. So I think this is a really good place to go, but I wouldn't do this one first. I think it's a little bit more complicated than some of the other ones I've mentioned previously on this list. Lot 40 Rye is the last item on our list. So this is a $40 whiskey. It's a 100% mash bill. is comprised of rye. And the few ryes I've had that are 100%, they're awesome. You know, it's like, this is what we're all about, and most of them do it very, very well. So lot 40 is one of those. And in fact, it starts to introduce some of the complexities that you can find behind the rye when you're drinking these. So in this case, you'll get some fruit flavors from this. So this list has been kind of, as I mentioned, a bit crowdsourced. So I hope that you really enjoy it. But in general, if you have tried some ryes that you really, really like, I would love to hear about in the comments. And specifically, I would love to hear about ones you've tried that you didn't like, because it might save somebody looking through the comments in the future from ever buying it themselves. So thank you for joining me here on the Whiskey Dictionary, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.